just want you to know that I asked Pete, I said, do you have a preference on which chair you want to take? He says, no, I don't have a good side, so. Good way to start, good way to start. Well, Pete, thank you again for being here. We've worked together for many years.
Right.
We've been in the trenches together, and I can think of nobody better to basically kind of set the stage for the state of the border, what's occurring, as I said, CBP, ports, between the ports, airports, maritime, all of these things. Kind of set the stage for the industry is what you would like for them to hear of where we're at today and kind of any forward-leaning actions that we're undertaking.
No, thank you. Thank you for inviting me here. It's always a pleasure to be here. You know, when I think back, 36 years in here when we first started on the southwest border, down in a small port in Calexico, and just where we were manpower-wise, you know, separate agencies, departments, immigration, border patrol, customs, USDA, agriculture, and just kind of how we were lined up to complete the mission that we had at hand. And I think back then, and I look at today on where we are and how much, you know, how forward we have come from then. And when I look at our problem set today, you know, back then, when we saw a problem or we're dealing with whatever the threat was and we were attempting to mitigate that threat, we dealt with it separately. Many times we were dealing it on paper, we were dealing it with a little bit of time lag on how we were going to address it, what we were going to do. We were doing our I2 charts with sticky notes, Post-it notes, right, on how we were doing this. And today, I look at how we have evolved, but I look at how the threat has evolved. And anywhere in the world, a package or a person could be at our border today, if they started today, from anywhere in the world, they could be at our border, and the threat is there for us to deal with. So as I think about how do we do this, right? And the amount of traveler, the amount of commerce, the amount of things coming at our border. So 1.15 million travelers a day coming through our border every single day. That's just northbound coming into the United States. 1.15 million every day. $9.2 billion worth of cargo coming into the country every single day. So we think about that, and we think about where are our threats. We got all this travelers coming in, number of passengers coming in. We got all this cargo coming in trucks and containers and vessels and all that. So how do we ensure that we are allowing commerce to grow, that we're ensuring that we're taking care of the economic prosperity of the United States while protecting the national security at the same time? And we think about information. So information for us is one of those drivers for us. The way we get information, the quality of information, and then how do we assess that information from a risk perspective? What are our opportunities there to do that?
Oh, does he?
So today,
I
talked a little bit about what we've done in regards to passenger numbers, talked a little bit about cargo numbers. From a terrorism standpoint and national security standpoint, we see that threat continue to evolve from us, from Eastern Hemisphere and how they get into the Western Hemisphere and showing up at our ports of entry or in between our ports of entry. We see that continuously evolve for us. We see the threat of encounters along the southwest border, along the northern border, and in our maritime.
That's great.
So
I've never been.
At the height of what we're dealing with, right, 2.5 million encounters that Border Patrol was dealing with and what we're doing along the border. Today, since June, we have really seen those numbers start to come down for us. So since June, when I start to look at what our numbers are on encounters, that has come down about 55% since June when we take June through the end of the year. The number of gotaways for us on Border Patrol has also come down. About 60% have come down. The number of gotaways have come down since June. When I look at our northern border, the number of encounters on our northern border has also dropped since June to about 69%. So October of this year, Border Patrol had about 61,000 encounters, right?
Cool.
And that compared to October of last year, is about 68, 69% drop on what we would have saw in October of last year. So as we look at those start to drop and what we're doing, which allows then our men and women to start doing enforcement work, to be proactive on what we're doing in between our ports of entry, at our ports of entry, what we're doing on the roadways, how we're coordinating and collaborating with state and local and other federal partners on what we're doing in regards to that. Fentanyl, over the last 2 years, we've seized 50,000 pounds of fentanyl in the last 2 years. Just the amount of what that looks like, and we continue to see the threats of precursors, additives, xylazines. We continue to see that threat coming across our borders. So from a finished product and fentanyl, methamphetamine coming into the United States, we see that coming in from Mexico. We know that threat, especially from a fentanyl perspective. It is Arizona and California where we see that threat coming in for us, or that we're dealing with it. And we have taken a number of proactive steps in order to deal with the fentanyl threat very specifically in regards to coordination with state and locals, in regards to coordination with our federal investigators and partners out there, in coordination at the department level, at the White House level on what we're doing in regards to proactively going after that threat. We have had a number of operations, and we continue to interact with our investigative partners and Mexico, which then brings me to the point of state of the border and what's important for us. So our border should be our last line of defense when we're really talking about what we're doing at the border. We have men and women who are on the border, and they do a fantastic job every day of keeping bad things and bad people out of the border while allowing legitimate trade and traffic to come across our borders for our economic prosperity. But that should be our last line of defense. So as we continue to work with foreign governments on what we're doing with mutual recognition agreements and what we're doing with customs agreements out there, continue to push how do we share information. Expanding our footprint worldwide. We've expanded our footprint in Mexico. We expanded our footprint in our Central America countries. We're continuing to expand our information sharing and information flow to other countries. I was just in Saudi Arabia last week in regards to talking to them about how do we expand information flow between us, right? How do we get individuals there in a joint security program on how do we share information on travelers, on cargo. How do we implement different programs that we're vetting against hot lists and vetting against terrorism and vetting against compliance? How do we start to share information there? After I'm done here, I'm flying into Mexico City. So I'll be in Mexico City once I leave here to go talk to Mexico. But how do we continue our partnership? How do we continue to interact with each other from an enforcement, from a compliance, right? We have individuals embedded units and at airports and at different places across Mexico to ensure that we're sharing that information, that we're getting some help on the front end in regards to deterrence, in regards to repatriations from foreign countries. People not getting on planes or are allowed to go forward based on risk and threat, to be able to do that and be able to push what we have out. From a technology standpoint, there are a lot of opportunities, I think, for us from a technology standpoint. And I think when we get into that conversation, you have a lot of smarter people in the room from CBP that will be talking about some of this. But when we talk about technology, we talk about AI, we're really talking about data integration. When you have an agency of 66,000 people with a mission set as complex as we have, our ability to not silo technology, a camera, an AST, an NII, to not algorithm, to not silo those things, right? I need to bring all of CBP together. That's our best opportunity. When we talk about risk and we talk about stopping a threat, our best opportunity is to use all the data that we have available to us. And that's just what CBP's data is. When we talk about people, cargo, biometrics, biographics, all the data that we collect every single day. And then how do we then ensure that we're working with the right partners, our IC investigators, that we're bringing all that information together in order for that officer, in order for that agent right? To make the best possible decision in a timely manner on what do we do with that person that's standing in front of me? What do I do with that piece of cargo I'm standing in front of? Or do I have an opportunity to prevent from somebody from getting on a plane or coming to the country, or a piece of cargo from loading on an aircraft or a vessel? How do we then start to really funnel that down to using the right type of AI, using the right type of technology to make those assessments? 1.15 million people a day we're going to make an assessment on. Does the traveler come in? Doesn't come in. $9.2 billion worth of cargo we'll make an assessment on every single day. Does it come in? Does it not come in? Right? So how do we do that? I think there's a lot of opportunities for growth. We also, in using AI and using technology, for us, we always want to have a human in the loop process for this. So we want an officer and agent making that final decision, right, on whether or not we're going to go do something with that anomaly or potential anomaly, whether we're going to react to that sensor, whether we're going to react to an anomaly on NII. So there's a lot of opportunities there for us, I think, as we really talk about what the state of the border is today and what potentially the future is for us tomorrow and within the next 5 years or so.
There you go. So one of the things that you mentioned was all CBP together. One of the things that's important for industry to understand is that CBP is the executive agent for a multitude of other agencies. So can you talk a little bit about that responsibility and that data coming in, some of the challenges associated with the differentiating
Right.
Data, structured, unstructured, and how that goes?
So over 500 laws that we enforce for other government agencies, right? That includes, I think, 47 or 49 other government agencies that we're responsible for. So we are America's, right, unified border security force. That's what we do every single day. That's what our men and women are doing. And so our ability then to collect data, not only for our own purposes, but for other government agencies and other regulations, right, becomes an important. So whether or not we're talking, and I can talk specifically to cargo, this is really for us, right, when we talk about trade and we talk about ACE and we talk about ACE 2.0, we talk about trade modernization, we talk about 21st century framework on what we're doing in regards to modernizing trade information, modernizing trade laws for us. I think the last time we really had a holistic trade modernization from a regulation standpoint, from a legislative standpoint, is probably a little over 30 years ago. So we're battling, right, the change of industry, the change of the way products are made and move and get to the United States, and we're behind the times on what our legislation and our regulations are. So modernizing that piece becomes an important aspect of how do we become more efficient and effective at allowing commercial trade to come across our borders, but also mitigate the threat that we see in it. De minimis, small packages. It's an industry that, a couple of years ago, that we didn't see that one coming, right? When we saw de minimis and we saw what that looks like today, over 1 billion packages coming into the United States last year. 4 million a day coming in. And not just in air cargo, not just, in express anymore, coming in all modes, coming in on truck, on our borders, coming in containers, air seaports. Just we're seeing the growth there and the volume of what that looks like. And when we think about what that is and what the threat is from all aspects, right? Whether that's a terrorism threat, whether that's a narcotic threat, whether that's a health and human safety threat on products coming in that shouldn't be coming in, that's a big vulnerability for us. So as we look to ensure that we're collecting the right information, to ensure that we're getting the right information to the right partners to make those determinations on a product should come in or shouldn't come in or should be inspected, and then our own enforcement authorities, right, collaborating on that piece. And I think we're thinking about it the right way. We want information to funnel into one place, and we're taking the lead on that. And then we're going to give the information to those agencies that have the authority to have that information for them to make that decision, protecting privacy, and then have that information come back and then we control whether or not that shipment is released, is held, is inspected with the partnership of the other agencies. But funneling it down to a single point where a decision is coming from a person that the trade recognizes and we've partnered with for a long time in order to develop that relationship on how we do business at the border.
Excellent. So those numbers are amazing. They were amazing when I was there, but all they've done is just grown by extrapolation. And they're going to continue to grow. So the challenges are going to be there. And this is where I think industry can play a big, big part on this issue. Pete, talk a little bit about I know to you personally, is one of the most important things, the workforce.
Right.
The challenges associated with it, the requirements that we have, and how you look upon the workforce challenges.
So when we think about all the requirements that we have on us, whether put on us by Congress or put on us by the American people, on the expectations that we have, that all starts with our men and women, right? And without having the right men and women there and providing the right support to them, this does not get done. We can have all the technology in the world, we can have all the AI, and we can have all the assist, but without the human intervention, without that heartbeat behind that technology, without the heartbeat behind that enforcement action, that decision-making process, this does not get done. So taking care of our people for us is our #1 priority. So how do we do that? So, right, we got to make sure they're trained, first of all. We got to make sure they're equipped. And then we got to make sure that they have the right type of authorities out there as they do this job. So let's start with hiring, retention, recruitment, and what we're doing there. So we've really taken a hard look over the last couple years on how do we streamline that process, right? We have officers and agents out there working long days and working long hours and doing that multiple days in a row. At some point, that takes a toll on our employees. So how do we ensure that we're helping that? And we're talking about hiring, how we streamline, how we've started to identify over the past couple of years, identify choke points and where that process is, to streamline how we shorten up that time frame. And we've come, from Air and Marine to OFO to Border Patrol, we've identified those choke points, and we're starting to streamline that process and shorten that time to hire for us. We're also looking at what we can do on our end in regards to what are the requirements that we have for us from a polygraph perspective, right? What adjustments can be made there, and looking at what refinements we have in order to help to ensure that we're getting the right candidate, the right quality candidate, but making sure we're not losing people that we should have in our employment, that qualify and we should be employing. So we're looking at those type of changes for us. We're looking at recruitment bonuses, which we're doing today. We're working retention bonuses, which we're doing today. We're working on hard to fill locations and what does that mean and what additional benefits we can provide to those locations. And Dina, I think, is on your panel today. Yes. In regards to what we're doing. And you have Pete also on your panel today for workforce care. So we're working a whole pay reform packages. So just what is hindering us from hiring individuals, hiring agents and officers just totally for CBP? And are there specific locations across the United States or even foreign that are even harder to fill that we can do additional things in regards to pay, reform, benefits in order to attract people into those locations? So we're doing a lot of that, putting a lot of effort into that. So when it comes to some of that we have the ability to do on our own. Some of it is, and there's probably quite a bit of it that's going to require congressional help in order to get that across the finish line in order to help do that. We talk about resiliency of our workforce. There's been quite a bit that we've done in regards to taking care of our workforce. So we talk about bringing in clinicians and operational psychologists within our workforce, increasing our chaplaincy and our peer support within our workforce, increasing child care subsidies for our workforce to ensure, right, agents and officers are working shift work, they're working overtime, unexpected overtime, long hours. So how do we make sure when they have a child at home that they have somebody to take care of, there's an opportunity there? We've increased backup care for our officers and agents and their ability to get backup care when unexpected things happen. We've wellness centers. So the wellness centers we've had in El Paso that's gone well. One thing we recognized there that employees started to use the wellness center in El Paso. And not only did employees start to use that, but we have equal usage between employees and families using that. So we've now gotten the ability, we're going to expand to do 2 additional locations and open up 2 additional wellness centers on what we're doing there. We've started to change policies within CBP on how we deal with substance abuse and mental health and those type of things that we recognize some of the hardships that our employees are going. And I think one of the real stats that really spoke to me the last time I was briefing the department here is when we did change the way, and you recognize, right, fitness for duties and what we do with employees during a process, we figure out, hey, we need to find out whether this employee is fit for duty. And a lot of times the employees were struggling with things, but they didn't have the confidence to come to management to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. I need some help. And what we did based on our process is we put them into a fitness for duty process, which could take a year, 2 years. They're without a weapon. They're going through a process. They're not making overtime, which adds and compounds to the difficulties. And then whether or not at some point we decide whether or not that employee is fit or not fit for duty. With the new policies that we've started to implement, we've cut that down. The number of fitness for duties that for a 2-year period, that we've cut that down by 54%. Wow. The number of people that we're putting through there. So we're getting them help up front rather than on the back end and getting them back to work. Not only has that helped us in regards to confidence in using and getting the programs that we've put out there for our employees, but it's a cost savings for us, right? Over $600,000 in cost savings of what we're spending on medical evaluations and tests and loss of employee being able to do the work. So that has really kind of streamlined, right, how we do this and how we're looking to take care of our employees from that aspect.
Right, right. Pete, we could go on for hours and just all things of a high interest. Last question I've got for you is on budget process, not numbers or anything of that nature, but one of the things that we implemented, I guess it's probably been about 12 years ago, planning, programming, processing, and accountability, which mirrors kind of the way the military does that. Right. One question, is it still in place? Is it working well? And especially the planning portion of it is something that I think industry can help in looking towards the next 3, 4, 5 years. Can you give us a little snippet of PUVA? Right,
so we still have the same process in place in regards to how we do that. So I do think from a planning perspective, right, we have that regiment in our process. And we're making sure that our leadership, you have EAC Miller here, you have EAC Sabatino here, you'll have EAC Cooper here, I think you may have EAC Highsmith here as well. In this, and making sure our leadership is involved in the process, them or their deputies involved in the process, to ensure that we're asking for the right things, that we're planning for the right things, and that we're budgeting or attempting to budget on what it looks like for us following year, 2 years, 3 years out on what we do in regards to our RAP cycles, what we do in the budget cycles, to ensure that we're doing that. So we're always planning and making sure that we're attempting to put the right numbers to what our needs are and what we see coming at us. We talk about threat and mitigation. We talk about what our need is for artificial intelligence and what are those needs. And we talk about barriers and sensors, what our needs for that is. And we talk about infrastructure at our ports of entry or our checkpoints. What is that and what are our needs there and what do we need in order to modernize and get that up and running. We talk about academies and training and what we're doing. So we have a formalized process in order to do that. But as you're well aware, right, our requests and our needs never match up on what we get from a budget cycle. And a lot of times, I think just the way the budget cycle works, by the time we get a budget in place really to formalize, we're halfway through the year, right? And so we've lost 6 months. We lost 5 months. We lost 7 months on this. Some of this is 1 year money on what we're doing. And so our ability really to plan ahead becomes important for us on what we're doing this. But a lot of times we don't have that opportunity to do it. We'll plan for it on what we're going to do, but there are mechanisms in place that sometimes don't allow it to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I asked that question is because earlier this morning I talked about transformational things that everybody's anticipating as we go into the new year. The budget planning processes and programming process are going to become more critical as we move forward. And this is a question rhetorical because I think we both agree on here. To industry, what the requirements are today that need to be met, critically important. But just as important is what I used to call the resultant impacts of meeting those requirements. The bad guys are going to adjust. So being forward-leaning, looking towards the future as to what else is coming. We're going to have a panel today, a couple of panels, that are going to take into account the literally daily extrapolation of requirements that occurs because of AI, machine learning, cognitive AI, all of these things associated with it. And then one that I'm going to sit on is going to be the UAS and CUAS. When I first heard about a year and a half ago, the challenge with UAS and CUAS situations, it's ungodly. And you're going to hear from the real experts today. But again, being forward-leaning and looking at what they're going to need 3, 4, 5, 10 years out is critically important because it's moving quickly.
Yeah, the counter UAS for us is a priority as well for us as we think about what that threat looks like today and what it's going to evolve to, not only from a threat perspective on what we see, and I think you have the AC Miller on that panel and you have Clint, I think, on that panel as well. Ability to recognize what the threat is and an ability to mitigate that threat are two things. And not only are we talking about the border, but then there are also large series events that we have to go to, whether that's a Super Bowl or those type of events that we're participating in and helping there. I think, as we really get to a program, a funded program there with years out, the authorities that could be improved upon on what we're doing as far as mitigation and how we do that. AMO, Border Patrol, OFO, they've developed really an expertise here that I don't think anybody else has in regards to exploitation and what we're doing from a counter UAS standpoint. A lot of other agencies coming to us in Air and Marine and CAMDEX and what we're doing in regards to being able to do some exploitation and be able to get some information out there, retrieve it and start to understand the threat on what we're doing. And of course, from a terrorism standpoint on what UASs could be used for, our ability to do that, the counter surveillance piece that we know happens all the time for us and the safety of our officers and agents out in the field. It's an important aspect that we need to address there for us.
Yeah. To say that CBP is going to be busy is an understatement. Inauguration, NSSE, Super Bowl, all of these things heavily involved. Pete, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, you being here with us. Thank you much, brother.